Good morning. Thank you all for making it through the rain. I had a little trouble getting here, but I'm glad that I did. And I guess today's topic is Pakistan. It is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I actually grew up there as a child and then worked on it again when I was in the US State Department. And I still try to go back about once a year. I was last back for the election in May 2013. So Longeza was nice enough to get us a map of Pakistan. I know you covered Afghanistan with Ambassador Eikenberry yesterday. And I'm just going to run through today a little bit of the historical context, which is very important when you talk about this region of the world. Then move into what's going on today in Pakistan. And then I want to hear from you and hear what you think the US government could be doing better or differently, what our national interests are there, how we should be handling this policy, because that's what you're learning here. So with that said, I'm going to go all the way back and take us back to the late 1700s and the British Empire. During that time, sort of from the 1760s onward, the British East India Company, which was sort of what today you would consider a partially state-owned enterprise, took over vast chunks of Asia and South Asia. By the time they were done, they ruled what was everything from what is now Burma, which you can't see on this map, all the way to the area that's currently the Afghan-Pakistan border. And it was not a very well-defined border. The Brits tried several times to conquer Afghanistan in the 19th century. In each case, they conquered Kabul pretty quickly, but then they were driven back and they were pushed out by local tribes. Sounds familiar to some of you, maybe. And because they were unsuccessful in this conquest, they essentially turned the border area between Afghanistan and Pakistan into a buffer zone. And to do that, they allowed the tribal chiefs to essentially rule the area by themselves, and they meted out very, very harsh tribal justice. So collective punishment, if one person in the village was found doing something that was not considered right by the British authorities, the entire village could be punished. Very, very conservative Islam later took hold there. And the reason I'm discussing these laws from the 19th century is because parts of those laws are still in place in that area today. And to really understand what's going on there and why it's so problematic for the US to do policy or to do any aid work in that area, it all comes back to this British time. So now we fast forward to the late 19th century, early 20th century, and the great independence struggle of the Indian subcontinent from the British. This, you've probably all heard of Mahatma Gandhi. He is kind of the most well-known figure of this. His great partner in this was Nehru. Both of them were Hindus, upper middle-class Hindus. And their Muslim counterpart, who initially was allied with them, but later became more and more distant from them, was Muhammad Ali Jinnah. And if there's one name you know about, you learn on Pakistan, that's a name you should know. Jinnah was a very moderate Muslim from a wealthy background. He practiced law in London. This is an upper crust problem to have. Not a lot of Indian Muslims were practicing law in London. And then he came back, and as he joined the independence struggle, he became more and more radicalized. And his Muslim party that he was leading became more and more radicalized and more convinced, frankly, that even if they did get independence from the British, they were never going to be able to, Muslims were not going to be able to live comfortably within a Hindu-dominated India. Thus, in the mid to late 1930s, came the drive for an independent Pakistan. And in 1947, in August 1947, the British finally turned over the Indian subcontinent back to the people who lived there. And they did it pretty rapidly. They also had a well-meaning bureaucrat, but someone who didn't know the region well, draw the boundary between what is Pakistan today and what is India. And that created an enormous enormous amount of problems. And it's hard to understate how much of a trial by fire this was for both the Indian and the Pakistanis who are in leadership positions today. So what happens in the summer of 1947 is rumors start that the boundary is about to be created, that an independent Pakistan is going to be created, and you have vast numbers of refugees, millions. The numbers range from about 2 million to 9 million refugees that move across these borders. So Hindus are moving east to India, Muslims are moving west to Pakistan. Hundreds of thousands of people are killed on the way in massive communal violence where people are equally culpable on both sides. It is a complete disaster. And this birth of Pakistan is the most important thing you need to understand if you want to understand Pakistan today. It has left an enduring chip on the shoulder of Pakistanis. This is a country that was born in the midst of massive crisis and massive insecurity. Within a year of its birth, they were at war with India over Kashmir. We won't go into those details here. The great founder of the country, Jinnah, had died of natural causes, but nevertheless, he wasn't there to stabilize the situation. And of everything that the Brits gave over to the Indian subcontinent when they left, it was decided that 83% would go to the Indian side and 17% would go to the Pakistani side. That sounds fine in theory. It was really hard in practice because, for example, all the government buildings were based in Delhi. They weren't in Lahore. They weren't in Karachi. They were dividing military goods and rifles and pencils and books. And Pakistan didn't really get its fair share, and it was a difficult, difficult, difficult time. On the Indian side, you had Nehru, one of the great independence leaders I just mentioned, rule the country for until 1964. So you had another 17 years of steady government. And by contrast, as I just said, in Pakistan, you have no such thing. You have Jinnah dying. His successor is assassinated 3 years later. So where you get a democracy, sometimes a rocky one, but where you get a democracy in India, in Pakistan, you get decades and decades of a back and forth between dictatorship and democracy, dictatorship and democracy. In the initial decade, over 70%, 70%, of Pakistani government spending was on the military. That is something that will warp a state development. This is a desperately poor country, and they felt like all of their budgets should go to military expenditure, essentially. Now it's about 25% of the budget, which is still high, but not as outrageous. And in the tribal areas that I mentioned earlier, Pakistan didn't change the colonial era system. They still had the same political structure until about 2009, and we'll get to that a little bit later. Now we fast forward to 1971, and in 1971, I don't think we have a map of the whole Indian subcontinent, but essentially Pakistan was not just what you see here. When it initially gained independence from India, it was this part called West Pakistan, and all the way on the other side, 3,000 miles away, East Pakistan. Well, in 1971, East Pakistan splits from West Pakistan and becomes the country that's now known as Bangladesh. So in 71, you have another war, another debilitating military expenditure. In the next year, in 1972, one of the great political leaders of Pakistan wins an actual democratic election. His name is Zulfikar Bhutto, and you should know him as well. He initially tries to reconcile with Indira Gandhi, who at that point is his Indian counterpart, but he also has some problems. He nationalizes a lot of enterprises, he massively increases military expenditures, so even though Pakistanis revere him as a great political leader, his legacy, I would say, is more mixed. He is overthrown in the late 70s, in 1977, by a military dictator called Zia-ul-Haq. And this is what I was saying before. You have this back and forth between elected government, dictatorship. Elected government, dictatorship.